Hey, this is Tom, and if I had $1 for every time I heard some buffoon with no idea what they're talking about giving information and advice about what's going on with the US banking system, I'd be a freaking millionaire within 24 hours. Now, over the past day, I heard so many clowns talk about this stuff and giving you some horrible information. I have to come out and make another US banking crisis video, which I didn't want to make. The whole purpose of the Federal Reserve, as it pertains to the Federal Reserve attempt to curb inflation, is to slow down demand. If they can get people to spend less, then demand will go down. And if demand for products and services will go down, the suppliers of said products and services will have to reduce their prices to attract more clients. And by reducing prices, they're going to reduce inflation. That's the theory. Now, the way you do it is you increase interest rates. If you increase interest rates, first of all, you encourage people to save, you make money more expensive, you basically create some sort of a quasi liquidity crunch. Basically, companies don't have money to borrow, and if they borrow money, it's very expensive, so not a lot of projects gets made, and people are more encouraged to save with these higher interest rates rather than to spend. That's the basic premise. Now, for this premise to work, what you want to see is two things. On the one hand, you want to see a reduction in CPI and PPI. And that's been happening. We have come down significantly from 9% all the way down to almost 5%, 6%. The other half that you want to see here, the other half of the picture you want to see here, is a slowdown or a cooling off in the job market. You want to see some job loss. Now, it's an unpopular thing to say that the Fed is trying to cause people to lose their jobs, but I'm not here to sugarcoat shit. This is exactly what they're doing. They're going to use some, politically correct words to explain to you how they want to downsize their frothiness in the job market, blah, 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 and all this fuckery. No, I'm going to give it to you straight. The Federal Reserve wants you to lose your job. And they want as many of you to lose your job as it's needed to reduce inflation. And they don't care about if you or your neighbor lose your jobs. They care about the macro. Now, currently we're at 3.5% unemployment, which is a historical record as far as the strong job market. The Federal Reserve wants this number to go to around 5%, another 1.5% of unemployment. Now, until that happens, the inflation isn't going to budge much longer. It came down from 9 to 5, but from this point on, from 5 to 2%, which is the target for the Fed, for that to happen, demand has to be crushed. For demand to be crushed, people need to start losing jobs. But then all of a sudden, you have this report. And this report says, well, jobs are better than expected. So it's not only that the Fed isn't hurting the job market, it actually is doing better. Now, if that's the case, well, that means that the Federal Reserve is probably not going to pause interest rate hikes. It's not going to reduce rates. It means that the Federal Reserve must increase the rate of interest in order to keep fighting this fight. The only problem is, and here where the banking system comes in, is that the banking system cannot allow this to happen, because if this actually happens, if the banking system is forced to exist in a high interest environment for another 6 months, another year and a half, there's not going to be a whole lot of banks from the regional smaller bank sector that's going to be left standing in 18 months if the interest rates remain elevated. Why? Well, it's a simple reason. That simple reason being that these banks are losing their deposits. The deposits are going away from the banks into treasuries. People are no longer willing to get 0.1% on their savings account. Instead, they'll take the 4 or 5% on a 3-month treasury and be liquid and absolutely safe. And the banks are losing clients. The banks are losing clients, which means they're losing money. Now, in order to provide liquidity to the customers that are leaving, they need cash. And they can't get cash anywhere right now because the majority of their cash is parked in bonds. And these bonds were purchased where interest rates were almost zero. And now interest rates are basically above 5%, which means that the banks, in order to actually sell these bonds and get some liquidity to pay the customers that are leaving, have to sell it at half price. But alas, when you sell the bonds at half price Everybody sees this happening and they understand that you're in dire straits. And then everybody starts pulling their money even faster, which starts a bank run. I just literally described to you what happened with SVB and a whole bunch of other banks. In fact, the latest bank that went out, which took a little bit longer, which was First Republic, actually lost 40% of the deposits just in one quarter in Q1 of 2023. There's not a single bank in the world that can withstand a 40% loss of deposits in a single quarter. Now, First Republic held a little bit longer than the other banks because they got a credit facility from the Fed for about like $30 billion, but eventually they ate that shit up and they went under. Now, luckily, nobody got hurt. All the depositors are safe from all the bank collapses from the cycle, partially because FDIC is going to insure more than 250,000, and partially because JP Morgan stepped into the shoes of First Republic and they'll take care of the depositors, etc., etc., etc. All this is fine and dandy. But now you have to understand what this job report means for the banking industry. Basically, right now, the banking system needs the Fed to reduce rates. So, in order for the banking system to go up for some air, they need the Fed to come down with interest rates, right? But for the Fed to do that, they need a viable case to show you, the public, the people who vote, they need a viable case to show you that inflation is getting better. Now, for them to show you that, they need inflation to come down further, a little bit further. It's not there yet. For that to happen, they need jobs to start going away. That's not happening. So if that's the case, the Federal Reserve is going to have a hard time selling you the story of interest rates must go down because things are getting better. This is a big, big monkey wrench in the Fed's plan. This is not good for the banks. And this means more banks will fail. This isn't going to be the last bank that failed. First Republic is not the last bank. It means more banks will keep failing. And it's going to be worst to best, obviously. But more banks will keep failing until the Fed budges. And what happened today with the jobs report only slows down the Fed ability to actually make that pivot. And I foresee more bank failures. But do I foresee an apocalyptic collapse of the banking system a la 2008, like Kevin said in his video with the burning house and all this shit? No. Because the big four banks are fine, the big banks are fine, even the second tier banks are fine. All of them have proper risk management profiles in which they have a lot of interest swaps that cover them for that situation. And also, don't forget the big banks, the big, massive national banks, they're enjoying this because they're getting customers left and right from small banks because they know that the big banks are safe. So in fact, their deposits are not being withdrawn that much because they're having to steal clients from the regional smaller banks. But when you go and you look at the regional banks, that is where the pain is. So the nuanced answer here is no, the sky is not falling. This is not 2000 yet. So this is not 2008 yet. None of this is true. It's all clickbait, fear-mongering porn to keep you clicking. On the other hand, are we 100% fine? No. Is this a good chance to see more banks fail? Yes. Probably more banks will fail. The banking crisis is far from over, and all of this is true. But this is not leading up to a massive banking collapse like we had in 2008. That's the whole story. Yes, the US banking system is in trouble, but no, it's not about the big banks. It's about the smaller banks. And what just happened actually make things worse. And whatever happens, there's a very high chance that the United States is heading for a recession, but it will come out of this recession. Everything will be fine. And no, the banking industry is not going to collapse into itself and basically implode and create this huge, crater of nothing. That's just clickbait. So don't let these guys fool you. Later.